So I've been wondering about the nature of sacrifice lately because it's a really baffling notion to the modern sensibility why an ancient culture or person would take the very best calves of your herd or crops of your harvest, or even members of your family like Isaac and Abraham, your firstborn son, and deliberately waste it, kill it, and give it away to keep the gods happy. Why would that evolve as a custom? It seems just so bizarre. But I actually think that modern people do understand sacrifice very well. We just think of it in different terms. So if you ask a modern person, well, what do you sacrifice? People can say all sorts of things that they sacrifice. Oh, I sacrificed my desire to watch Netflix last night so I could have a soulful conversation with my significant other to maintain a relationship. Or, oh, I sacrificed my physical comfort this morning to go to the gym. And a big way we sacrifice is we sacrifice the fruits of our labor, the money we earn, if we're prudent, increasingly rare among Americans, and we save it. We put it in the bank in the hopes that it will pay off in the future. And I actually think that last example shows the similarity between modern and ancient sacrifice. The ancient practice was psychologically something like this. Take something that you value now in the present, and you give it away to a higher and supreme being or process, power, that you and everyone around you in your community put faith in, despite not fully understanding it, in this case God, in the hopes that by establishing a good relationship between you and the transcendent through that sacrifice, in the hopes that will pay off for you in the future. So sociologically, if you look at modern faith in banking institutions and the Federal Reserve and the stock market, it's very similar to a faith in God. We don't understand it. Even a very educated modern person doesn't understand the way banks work. And yet we believe in the goodness and the integrity of them and those around us. It's a collective and intergenerational process and belief in the value of taking the fruits of our labor today and giving them to that higher system in the hopes that it will be better off in the future. Now, you may say, well, the banking system is created by humans and faith in God is an entirely different phenomenon. But they're both actually very sophisticated attempts to solve a very difficult problem. And the problem is something like this. Well, we're in this state of being fallen from grace. We're in this terrible, tragic situation where we have self-consciousness, and that has a lot of good things to it, but the price we pay for that is this terrible knowledge of our own vulnerability. And we have to pay for that. We've been kicked out of paradise. We have to pay for that by working, by slaving away, and by the sweat of our brow do we survive. And whether or not you believe specifically in the story of Genesis, that's psychologically true, that our self-consciousness leads to awareness of our vulnerability. And if we are not willfully blind to that fact, we know that not only am I going to be hungry today, but I'm going to be hungry tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. So it behooves us to work to make sure that we can meet our needs in the future. Now, the complex problem is this. We know that that's not only true for us, but we know that it's true for everyone else that we know. All other humans, they'll be hungry today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And so will the other 7.5 billion people around you. So we have slowly started to try to develop these really actually pretty sophisticated ways to solve that problem, to sort of smooth the production and consumption curve so that even if there's a famine, we'll be taken care of and we'll be able to survive into the future. And both ancient and modern notions of sacrifice actually are part of that same continuous process to solve that very complex problem. One of the most complicated problems, collective problems that we can try to solve. It's basically the problem of economics and politics. Now, what's funny about the word sacrifice, the etymology of it seems to have nothing to do with everything I've just said. The word means to make sacred. So sacrifice, like sacred, sacrosanct, the sacra part, and vice is to make, like manufacture or factory or artifice or beneficent, or that, those sorts of words. That FIC root is to make. So sacrifice, to make sacred, and it actually does relate to some part of this process, and that is the way in which the ancient idea of sacrifice was to give something you value to God in order to establish that great relationship, and that makes the gift sacred if you establish the right relationship with God through the giving of the gift. And well, it may behoove us as moderns to understand that the best way to make our sacrifices is to give the very best of what we value, as difficult and painful as that is, to voluntarily give it up, something that we've worked for, to give that up to the greatest purpose, the highest good that we can conceive of. And if we honestly and forthrightly give the very best of ourselves and our efforts to God, or the very best system and process that we have been able to come up with for facing the tragic conditions and constraints of self-conscious human experience, the idea is that's the best way to do it, is to give the very best. That's what makes the sacrifice sacred. If we give our very best of us to the very highest and best thing we can conceive. And this is actually articulated in the very next story in Genesis, after the creation story and being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Cain and Abel, among other things, is about two basic canonical patterns of reaction to the condition of being fallen from the garden and having achieved self-consciousness, but with it being punished by needing to work. Abel's sacrifices are first rate, and he's established a good relationship with God. Cain's sacrifices aren't, and that and his reaction to that fact is what lead to his bitterness and resentment and murderous destruction. So it really behooves us to understand that modern sacrifice is actually part of a continuous process that has been practiced ever since self-conscious humans have been around. And the best answer to these problems that we've come up with is that you have to sacrifice the very best in yourself to the highest good you can conceive. And that's the best way to address the tragic limitations of being human.